Hi everyone. Let's start the section by creating a studio project setup with lighting, a clay material, and preset BPR uh, settings so that once you're done your silhouette project and you have a sort of a week's worth of silhouettes to work from, we're going to select two of those and then you're going to bring them into this project where we have everything set up ready to begin sculpting it further. Let's show you how I do that. Having a pre-made one makes it a lot easier to move forward quickly. Doing it now and having something here pre-saved that you can tweak in the future also makes things a lot easier and a lot faster. Let's see. Now you could, when I press comma here on the keypad, I already have a few projects with materials already set up that I like. I've got my own clay line, which is working out, and studio setups, which I'll probably post later on. And you could actually start with one of these, pre-prepared dyno axes or default spheres or something like that. But I want to start from scratch because I think it's important that we understand how to develop that for ourselves in terms of making our work look unique. Everybody who owns ZBrush can use these and render directly out with shadows, and I don't know if these have BPR settings already done, but all of it's the same. Let's make yours unique and interesting and give you a little edge up here. So let's hide that. Let's go to Tool, and wherever your ZBrush is installed, you just go to there. ZBrush, and what else we got here? And let's move down to projects, or no, not projects, sorry. Z tools, there it is. And let's just grab a polysphere to start with and open. Let's draw it on the canvas, press edit, and now this is sort of a live polymesh. Alright, this is where we want to start. And let's just to show this off, let's just do BPR, super basic, right? Let's throw the floor on so we can see that. Got to move it a little update here, right? And it's casting a shadow, which is all we want. Something like that. Now the advantage of doing this is that if you're not bringing in an object from another session or another version of ZBrush, the scaling is correct, the shadows are working properly, and we're starting fresh here. So we've got a nice clean canvas to start with. We just put in a base orientation. First thing I do, I just go over to Draw, and down here you'll see the grid size, and just notice you can expand the grid. I don't know how large my object's going to get. I just max this out, and I turn this to, well, actually you could max it out. I'm not sure if that's going to affect recording size, but if I do 12 tiles and I make this one, for example, 24, that's usually big enough to have objects cast full shadows however we do our light setups. So let's start there. What I want you to do is we can't make adjustments to the material as long as it is a matte cap. We're going to be doing some live materials. So I want you to go to Basic Material 2, right? And so now we've got a little bit of specularity. That specularity is coming from the light up here, the single light. We are going to have a light setup. This light is going to remain on. Look what happens when you turn it off. I mean, it's reflected here, but if I go into lights, light cap, and I start adding lights, it starts to affect this. But your matte caps, for example, that you flip back to, the icons don't work, basically because this light isn't on. So you need to either leave that on, now these are back, right? Leave that on, and then if you don't want to use this light, just drop the intensity down. I like to build on top of this light, so we're going to leave it on. So here you have your Basic Material 2, which we've selected. You've got base light system set up already with a single light. And when I BPR that, I get this. Oh wait, let's go back to light for a second. I still have this one on. Let's delete that light. We don't need it right now. We'll get to that in a second. So you have this basic setup. Now, what's wrong with this? There's nothing really wrong with that at all. It's not unique to anyone, but it'll serve a purpose. That Basic Material 2 has a bit of specularity. It has a nice gradient on it in shading. It casts a decent shadow, which is the standard standard lighting or default lighting setup within ZBrush. But let's make that a little bit more interesting for us. This material works good. We're going to change the color first off. So I like to, I mean, how is your clay? What color is your clay? We just play around with the color here. That works. And I always choose color first because the lighting is affected by the color. How much light is absorbed by that color and reflected back to you in terms of a real lighting setup. And I like this. So that's sort of clayish color to me. It can be any color you guys want, but I like the little sort of warm clay tone. Okay, let's BPR that. So it still works with our background. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is that this dark gray gradient, although gives the illusion of depth for this type of render, also affects contrast in terms of how you light your object. So if I start to add lights to this, every light I add is going to make this seem super, super bright because the contrast against the black is so stark. So we have to, I think, you've got to change that to get an accurate light setup. So let's, not that this is wrong, you can build off of this and you can live with that high contrast, and that may look good, it may be what you're looking for. For me, I kind of go back to just a single color gray, just to begin with, because I'm going to eventually generate a background based on my light setup. So now you've got this with a single shadow. There's a harshness here, and the subpixel setting is at 3 right now, which is pretty good. And I've got this set up so I can see all of my maps that are created in a BPR. Color's good. It's working off the background. As a rule, if the color of your object is warm, in terms of creating decent contrast, other than value, a value step from here to here, then this background should be cool. So that's just another opposite that makes the composition work a little better. So first I'm going to fill this with color. So we have that selected. Let's go to, we're not going to fill it with material yet because we're going to make some changes to that, but color I think is fine. So just go to RGB and color, fill object, that's full. And our background now, we can start tweaking the background. Now I'm going to start with a cool color. Let's go to document, and you'll see this back here is already a base gray. Let's just click that. Now it's blue. Too blue, because now the contrast is flipped. We have a super bright background, a dark object in front. We just want it slightly cool. So let's find a value that we think is good, and then let's just pull it over into blue just a little bit. Let's go back to document, click that. Well, that doesn't work too bad. Let's render that. Okay, so that contrast isn't too bad. It could still be just a tad darker, I think. Document, let's click that, a little darker. That works. It's not too bad. And easy on the eyes. You're going to be sculpting in this studio for a long time. So besides this setup allowing you to move forward quickly and having having it pre-prepared, making it nice and fast and easy for you in the future, you got to stare at that all day long, right? For 8 hours a day if you're doing this in the studio. So you've got to have something you can live with, and that's easier on the eyes. So I don't mind that. I might even go a tad darker because I'm just that way. Oh, he said darker's good. Material. No, what am I doing? Draw, document, click back. Okay, let's just BPR that. Okay, that's nice. I like that. Okay, so now we're looking at the shadow. We've got in the BPR, we've got a really choppy shadow line here. And let's go over to render, BPR shadow, and let's look at why that is. Let's dock it. So when we look at our shadow settings for the studio, things are going to change. As this object gets bigger and you sculpt, and it gets larger inside the sort of bounding box within ZBrush, the shadows are going to get longer, shading is going to change a little bit, but this is the basis of things to start. So right now blur's on 2, but blur doesn't really affect the shadow casting. What affects the shadow casting is angle. Right now there's 0, so let's take that to 5 degrees and re-render. You're going to notice that now there's a little shift in the shadow. The rays cast to create the shadow are now being skewed 5 degrees. So it starts at 0, creates a shadow, skews at 5 degrees, and casts shadows in between that, and you get a blurry edge, or the effect of multiple light sources within that 5-degree range. And what it does effectively do is blur the edge. So actually let's go up to 8 here, just a little bit more, because I think that will clean it up tighter. There you go. So it's a little cleaner, something cool happening there, it's a little softer, and the color of the gray is great, the background's working, but the lighting is fairly simple. You could go straight in and start sculpting from here and it would work just fine. But let's create something a little more dynamic. And we'll turn off shadows. We're going to want AO. So under render properties, let's turn ambient occlusion on. Let's just render that out and see a slight difference. You got a little drop back now. Let's look at the AO here. And that's pretty good. Usually the standard settings for ambient occlusion are fairly nice to just start with, especially in a studio setup. You're going to want to tweak this type of thing later as you develop detail in your figure, and when we work our way towards a final render at the end of this program, we'll do some tests and tweaks, and we'll make that AO a little bit tighter. But for now, it's not too bad. Let's just check out those AO settings. Ambient occlusion. Right now, this is the basic setup, and it works really well. The one thing I play a lot with is gamma, resolution, and number of rays as we work our way towards a final render. You want more rays for more detail. Resolution, as your document size gets larger, you want to increase this to its maximum most likely. And then I play with the contrast in gamma. Let's just do that. Let's go to 4 and re-render. And it gets a little bit darker. Let's go 0.1 gamma. Do that again, we'll see. Yeah, hello, super dark, right? So AO is important. That's a very interesting effect. You can see it's sliding off. This shadow is actually, or this ambient occlusion pass is sliding off my the floor there. Let's just see that. That's actually kind of cool. So let's just get this back to something that we know works. So 4 was all right, but let's do 3.5 and re-render that. There we go. Let's update that. Shadow should still be on. There we go. So this is pretty good. We have a slightly darker ambient occlusion, which I like, a little more contrast across the surface. The floor is on. We're casting a decent shadow. Color is good. Let's go over to light here, and now let's create a new light. And it's going to create one right in the center of our object, as you can see. We grab the red dot and pull things over. I'm just going to create a little bit of side lighting, and just do another render here. Right, and it's casting a shadow across here as well, and that's kind of cool. There's not a lot. This doesn't do anything for our sphere at this point. I mean, it's not bright enough. If we're looking for edge lighting, we've got to pull it a little further back and brighten it up. Let's do that. So let's go back to light, You know what, let's dock it over here in the other shelf. So we're going to light, and let's just drag this over here. And so let's pull this right to the back, and let's increase the exposure a little bit more. And our fall off, let's just lower that so it covers a little bit more of the sphere. Play with our gamma here and just either brighten that up or not. And the fall off, let's do that, and then let's just drag this over. Let's render that and see what we get. Well, we get a certain change in the direction of this shadow, but I don't want, it's because it is casting shadow on this face and it's sort of affecting our fill light. So let's turn the shadow down, or we can turn it right off and do a re-render. And this takes a bit of time. Like, the setup is not quick, but it will enhance the look of your sculpture, or make it easier to assess your sculpture as you develop it once it's brought out of the silhouette stage. So kind of like that. And here's one thing that I do like to do. I'm just going to turn the exposure down a little. Leave that as harsh. Let's do another one just to check that out. I don't mind that. That's cool. The one thing I like to do is I'll add a new light, and I'm going to bring that down here to the bottom. Now it's going to create a slight light adjustment here, and that is okay. And that's what we want. We're looking for a little bit of bounce light on the bottom of the ball, the bottom of our figure. And we're going to take this and we're going to select the color from the background, because our background is essentially the floor here. And let's do another one. Let's turn the shadows off here as well. Another BPR. It's pretty good. Let's brighten. Now, color is our background, and we can see a little bit of a splash here. But let's just increase the strength of that. Just enough so we can see it on our sphere. That's nice. Now, our ball color is warm. Our background is cool gray. This is slightly, this is straight white, so it's cold. Now, we don't want to warm it up, but we might want to adjust the color, something that plays a little bit more with this warm value. So let's just go back over here, and let's just grab the color off of our canvas, or off of the sphere. Now it's in this orange range, right? So the opposite of orange on the color wheel, I believe, is blue or purple. So let's just, we're going to do the opposite color selection off of here. I'm just going to pull this over here for now. I don't want it pure blue. I think that is a little much. You know what? No, let's see what I can get out of this. A little bit more of a purple color. And let's go back to this one. We're going to choose our color. Yeah, you know, let's try something. And you can see it on here. You'll be able to tell if that is working or not working. Does it work with our orange base in the clay? You know, if it's just straight white, you know, it's pretty harsh. But as you start to add value, it affects that. I don't mind that. Let's just draw this over and see if any other color really works. Well, it's subtle. Subtlety is important. Let's render that and see what we get. Yeah, see, I don't mind that. It's a little softer. Not quite blue, not quite white, but it does make a difference. I kind of like that. Okay, now I don't usually have wax on in my clays, but let's go to material, turn the wax modifier all the way up. It's going to give you a warning that it's not set up in the render settings. So you go to main properties, click wax preview, and now it should be on here. Let's BPR that, yeah, and you can see a little bit of red coming into play from our wax. Now that it does make it look waxy, it does make it look a little bit more like flesh, even though our skin, we never chose really, I guess that could be a skin tone, this sort of warm clay gray. But that's pretty harsh. I don't want to be distracted too much by sort of the effects of subsurface scattering when we're working. I'm really looking for a clay material. So for me, I'm just going to adjust the strength down. If I do want it on, it's going to be subtle. I think we'll leave this at 50 and see what that looks like in a render. Not too bad. Still looks waxy to me. Let's drop this down to 25 and try that again. And it is essentially a trial and error type of process. Well, that's working. I don't mind that. Let's just see what it is with it on and off. So let's go to render. Let's turn wax on. It's not much visual difference. Let's just render it out. Yeah, you know what? If you like it, you can leave it on. I think I'm going to leave mine off. I think I like the color we chose. So that's not too bad at all. Background's good. This is good. We've got a nice side light. We've got a fill light working for us. But now I might add, well, the core shadow is right down here, and that looks good, although we're getting some color wash from the floor up onto our sphere based on the color we selected for light. I think that's light 2. Right, that's not bad at all. Well, let's try one more light. Let's add a new light. And let's take it over to this side, and I just want to try that. And how does that look? As you add more lights, the BPR is going to take a little longer calculating all of those things. You know what? I actually don't mind that little brightness there. Let's turn the strength up on that one to 0.3. No, I like that. That looks good. Kind of adjusts our core shadow a little bit. We're casting a little bit of a shadow over to this side now, and I like that. And shadow strength right now is at 100, but it's being affected by the side light. And if you look here, we've got a deeper core shadow, or pardon me, on the floor you have a deeper shadow here. You're still effectively getting some light play across the sphere and all the way around here, which is kind of cool. And you have good color, and the form is reading fairly nicely. So let's go, now that you've got this set up, let's turn lights off. And it can be as simple as this for our setup. Now you're getting the image is breaking a little bit around the edge of the sphere. That could be a result of multiple BPR passes. Let's just do one clean one. That's not too bad. It's still a little edgy. We can get rid of that. And how we're going to do it is we're going to go into, BPR and into the filters. We're going to turn the first one on, which is noise and strength, and we're just going to drop the strength down a little bit. I don't mind a little bit of noise. I kind of like my my renders to look a little photographic, so that little blend helps quite a bit. We're going to drop this blend back based entirely on depth. So we're just going to put our depth to 1. And that kind of just breaks up the background a little bit. It makes this look quite nice. We're also going to, and I've changed nothing else here. And we want to keep it as simple as possible for our clay render. We don't want to get caught up in the ZBrush when we're doing render passes as tests, taking up a bunch of time. So that's why we're keeping our setups a little bit simple in this sort of clay development and studio development, so that we can get to work, make it look good in terms of being able to assess our object as we go forward. But we're not getting carried away with all the effects. We can tweak and add and adjust those later. What we really want is a good representation of our sculpture. And of course, if we're doing works in progress images in the future, posting those to ZBrush Central or something like that, our renders will look fairly nice straight out of the gate with this pre-save project or studio project. So we've got noise. Let's go to the next one. Turn that on, and that is blur. Now it's set at 0.5. Let's just turn it on and off, and you can see it affects the edges a little bit, and it kind of cleans that up. We're going to do this we want to blur by depth, and that works fairly well. And let's just adjust the strength, and you can see it does blur that edge out pretty well. We'll set our strength here to something that doesn't blur out our entire image. Let's just set our strength to 0.4. And you can increase the radius, and you'll eventually get a little halo around here for radius. That works. Not looking for the halo too much, but I do want that blurred out slightly. There's a sort of balance between strength and radius that creates that. And you will have to adjust this later on based on depth, or change the radius and change the strength as your object gets bigger, because it is based entirely on depth at this point. And you may, when we do get our object in here to develop it further, as we sculpt and do renders, we will select the nearest depth and the furthest depth, and that's going to give us a cleaner blur effect later on. For now, with the sphere, this setup allows us to get a fairly decent clean render. What's our next one here? Sharpness. I don't use right off the bat. This one here is Orton, and you can see when I turn that on, you get a shift in contrast, almost as if clink, someone's turned on a light in there. And that's actually okay. Our re-render looks good. Right? It just changes the overall contrast level. Now we can set this by, well, we've got our choices here. It can be by cavity, depth, SS, AO, shadow, whichever we want, right? But I'm just trying to think, what's the best way to get? If you do it by ambient occlusion, it's going to act a lot like a Fresnel effect. And it's only going to brighten up the areas based on your ambient occlusion paths. It's going to forget everything else. That doesn't really work. Shadow. So based on the shadow paths, isn't really doing much for us in the shadow area. For now, well, I mean, have a look at that for now. It's only darkening up the edges of our sphere. Not sure that's what we want to do for that. Let's turn that off. Don't mind that, but in terms of its brightness, let's just leave everything at 0 and just leave the strength. Let's play with the strength just to bring the light up a little in our studio setup, just somewhere around there. Alright, we'll skip all these. Glow I don't use. Fade I don't use at the moment for this type of setup. Colorize don't use yet. We have the red filter, green, blue, and saturation. Now this is one that I do play with, and hue I don't use at this point, but we can make adjustments later on if we want. Saturation. So right now it's set to 5, a positive value, and it's affecting the saturation of the entire image based on its selecting and affecting the entire image. We want to change that. Let's leave the strength up, and you can leave it right up, and we'll see how it's affecting things. I only want this to affect the sphere. I'm going to use this to skew the Fresnel effect. So as reflections are placed on this, and there are some environmental reflections here, everything facing me directly, I'm looking directly at the ball, and the reflection coming right back, or the colors that I see coming right back, are essentially unaffected by reflection. Am I saying that right? As this curves to the outside edge, the reflections get brighter. So you see less of the material beneath that reflection. So as it turns to the sides, it's being affected. There's less color showing and more reflection on the edge. So we want to look at this by, saying, okay, so I'm going to see more of the surface color of my clay through the reflection from the face, from this angle I'm looking at. It's bouncing straight back at me, and I see the base color unaffected by reflections. As it turns to the side, as the object curves around to the edges, I see less of the color beneath reflection and more of the reflection. And so the reflections appear to get brighter. Essentially, you're just seeing more of it. So having your color fade away to the outside edge works. Now this is really strong. Of course, we don't want to change we don't want to have that much of a color difference. So let's just play with the color, or play with our strength settings. Let's see how that works. I don't want to oversaturate because I do like my clay color a little bit. That seems to work. Let's render that out again. Not too bad. Now with all of these, as we layer on filter after filter, we're going to make some adjustments. Now this color here with our saturation has punched up that light color a little bit, and I'm not sure I like that. So let's just make a tweak. Go back to light cap, select this light over here, and let's adjust the color away from the blue a little bit, and let's try that. It's still a little blue. Interesting. Let's go into our material setup and let's look at the modifiers. No, there's no color aligned to spec, cavity, diffuse, or anything like that. And I'm leaving these alone, although we could play with them if you really want to get crazy with the with it and create a different kind of clay color. Well, this is working for me. It's looking nice. We've got a good set of core shadows. We have a decent reflection, or pardon me, a decent specularity, side lighting, and color We have a cool colored background, a warm colored clay. This light is still giving me pause. So let's go back into the light setup, and we still have that color selected. I'm going to take it down even further. That's better. Kind of like that. That's a little better for me. Alright, and let's go into render, and I'm just noticing now blurring the shadows is going to affect the blur on the object, not the ground. So just keeping that in mind, let's close this render palette and go over to blur. Let's just blur those up to 5. Let's see how that brightens it up a little bit. Let's look at our shadow. Yeah, you can see in the thumbnail the shadows really are here along the edge and the ground. So that's working. Alright, and this now is looking really, really blue. So let's go back to the background or into document and this background here. Now we've changed the color based on our selection here, so let's just take that right back to a dark base gray. Document and select another one. It's not too bad. Let's render that. Oh, saturation. Oh my goodness, yeah. Let's go back to our render settings, dock that over here, and go to filters. If I left one on, is it really, it's this that is affecting the background color in a poor way. Yeah. Let's just reverse that so it doesn't affect the background as much. Now you can see it's starting to pull color away from the outside edge here, which gives the illusion of light from our studio being splashed onto this. So now they're sharing a sort of similar tone. That's all. That's okay. Our strength is like full on -1. Let's just take that down a little bit. Now it's not affecting our clay color as it was before. Let's just play with that and do another render. Now I like that a little bit better. Background still cool gray. This is a little bit warm. Our lighting is slightly cool. We have the Fresnel effect, which is, you know, pushing the reflections towards the outside edge and keeping our color more true in the middle. Our shadows aren't too bad. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back into shadow here and just increase our angle to 10. Let's see if I can't just soften that edge just a little bit more. Do re-render here. Alright, that's not too bad at all. And I'm fairly happy with that in terms of a base studio setup, and this is pretty good. Now we're going to do one more thing. Let's close render, and I want you to go down to surface, noise, and your noise window is going to come up, and you can see it's a fairly small scale noise out of the box. Let's scale that up quite a bit, excuse me. Not quite to maximum, but let's say to 50. And then I want you to grab the curves and I want you to bring them down just nearly level. Let's bring this other one up. And you can start to just shift this. And all we're looking for is a little bit of tooling on the clay that makes this appear like it's got some faceting happening. That's not too bad. Let's turn our strength down a touch, and our scale we want to play with. So that seam in the alpha is right here. It's cutting across, making it look a little strange. Scale it down slightly. Okay, this is fine for me for now. Let's go. Okay, now it's got a little bit of tooth to it. You can actually begin to read these surfaces a little bit better. Let's BPR that. And it's beginning to feel more like a real ball of clay in real space. The effects that we have created using the BPR filter system with the blur, the grain here, or the noise, and our little desaturation with Fresnel just gives this a little bit more of a realistic effect, a realistic render. So when we do bring our objects in from the silhouette portion of the course, we've got a ready-made studio ready to go. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's just do a little quick test and see how that works. Right, not too bad at all. I don't mind the green color of the floor. We can actually change that, I think. Draw. Floor. I thought we could. Where is that? Modifiers, maybe? We'll look at that after. Anyways, you can see there's our unique to us ball of clay. Let's throw some perspective on it there. Let's render that. I keep in mind that all of the adjustments that we've made in the BPR filters can continue to be adjusted as we move forward. And now that when we begin to build our figure or bring an object into this studio project, we will have it essentially ready to go. Let's go to File. We're going to save this out as a new project. You can save it in ZBrush 404 and in our projects folder right there. And I have a few. We're going to rename this Studio 5. And they're all different light setups, different materials. So it really is, you can make a set of these for yourself and use them anytime. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to adjust the surface noise. Let's go edit and just tweak that a little bit. There we go, a little more subtle. One more render to check. Yeah, see, that's nice. That'll work. That'll work for us. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, as long as noise is on, got RGB on as well. Turn RGB off for this. Let's go to clay. My lazy mouse was on standard as normal. I'm going to X on the keypad to create some. Oh, gotta turn RGB off for clay as well. Anyway, as long as now this is working, you can really test. Am I getting? Does it feel like clay? To me, that color reads as clay. The reflections work in terms of being able to read a side. Details and proportion. The front light is working for me and creating good shape. And it really, right now, the color is what's selling this as a piece of clay material. And you want to become comfortable with what this looks like. You can call it clay, sculpting material, really whatever you want, as long as it does the job. So it really has to work for you, and spend some time in creating that studio setup so that you're ready to go when you're called upon in either a work environment um, or just for your own projects. Having it there completed makes it so much easier just to go forward. So let's just test our little strange creepy deepy shape out. Bazinga. Do that. There you go. Looking pretty good. We got nice side light. We've got nice side light, good shadows. We've got a little bit of blur. It seems to fit the environment, and this color works out pretty well. So I think this is going to be a fairly good material for us to move forward with. Slow this down. Watch it a few times. Note the settings. If you want to copy this one, feel free. I'll also post up a few of my own studio setups so that you guys can try out. But I really encourage you to make your own, make it unique to you, and it's going to be one of those things that sets your work apart from everybody else's. So having something like this ready to go makes a lot of sense. Before I save, I don't want all of this project information or the undo history saved with this project. So what I will do is go to undo, edit, undo, delete. Well, actually, I'm going to just take this back to 0, or maybe not 0. We want our color. Yeah, that's where we want to be, right there. A little bit of noise, and we want to delete the undo history, and then we want to resave this. Let's get this on screen. So if I do that, I render that out. Just double check that I'm happy with it here before I save it. Not bad render, good color, everything else is working. Let's just go to edit, no undo history, we're good. File, save as, and let's resave it as Studio 5. Yes, there we go. So now we've got this studio ready to go. Our new and different light setup, our new clay material based on basic material 2. Oh, and you know what? There's one more thing I forgot to do. Let's just go to material and color and fill object just to make sure that that is completely full. Perfect. Let's resave it. Oh, cancel. It's doing undo history again. Edit. Delete undo history. File. Save as. Save as 5. Save. There we go. And the reason I suggest you do that, if you're going to share these, you don't want all your history in there of your work and your tests and everything else clogging up the file. So if it's clean, then you're essentially giving everybody a pre-set up ball of clay, colored in background, ready to go, and they can begin. So there you are.